Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of our Collective Impact webinar series, a conversation with organizers of global, national, and community August breastfeeding events. Just to go over a couple logistics for today's webinar. During today's session, all attendees are in listen-only mode, so you're automatically muted by the system. At the end of the session, we'll hold a Q&A session with all of our presenters, so please submit your questions either during presentations or afterward through the questions box in your GoToWebinar panel. If you're having audio problems or any other questions, please email office@usbreastfeeding.org, and one of our staff members will be happy to assist you. So here is the webinar control panel for submitting questions. If you don't see it on your screen, it is probably minimized. If you want to click on the orange arrow, that should be to the right of you, and it'll pop right back out. And as you can see, you can use this chat box down here to share questions during Q&A. And I will send over to Camille. You may be muted, Camille.
I was muted. Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Abbey, and I serve as the Events and PR Manager with the USBC. Our topic today is the many events and recognitions taking place during August, which is what we call National Breastfeeding Month. This year's theme is Many Voices United, and as such, we are so pleased to host this session in collaboration with the organizers of World Breastfeeding Week, Native Breastfeeding Week, and Black Breastfeeding Week. Next slide, please. Presenting today will be Amal, Omar, Salim, who will be speaking about World Breastfeeding Week, Jaisha Lyons, Echo Hawk, who will share about Native Breastfeeding Week, and Anaya Shengodele Ayoka, who will talk about Black Breastfeeding Week. Next slide, please. From the USBC team, you're going to have Sarah Walls, Senior Communications and Program Coordinator, who you heard managing the welcome and logistics slides. Myself, Camille Abbey, Events and Public Relations Manager. Miriam Rodriguez, Coalition Relations Coordinator. And Kiya Jane, Executive Director of the USBC. Next slide, please. As many of you know, the first week of August is World Breastfeeding Week, and this year's theme is Support for a Healthier Planet. Such a great grounding for our conversation. That's followed by the second annual Native Breastfeeding Week. The third week of the month is going to be a spotlight on infant and young child feeding in emergencies, and Black Breastfeeding Week is August 25th through 31st. Next slide, please. Before we learn a little bit about each week of recognitions and celebrations from the presenters themselves, I'm just going to say a few words about the origin of National Breastfeeding Month. On August 6, 2011, the USBC officially declared that August is National Breastfeeding Month at a community baby shower event hosted by Howard University Hospital and the DC Breastfeeding Coalition. In addition to the National Breastfeeding Month proclamation, the day's events included participation in the Big Latch On and a visit from Latch On America cross-country bus tour. I encourage you to read the proclamation, and I'm going to share the link to that in a moment, with all of the whereases that it comes with, because it's really all about what we're doing collectively, namely to, and I'm going to quote, advance breastfeeding on our nation's agenda through collaboration, leadership, and advocacy, so that all U.S. families will have the opportunity to breastfeed. So really this is all about advocacy and action through collaboration, which is so appropriate for the month and for our webinar today. With that, I'll pass it on to Sarah to introduce our first presenter. Sarah?
Thanks, Camille. Our first presenter today is Dr. Amal Omar Salim. She is the Executive Director of the World Alliance for Breastfeeding Action, also known as WABA. She is a nutritionist with a PhD from Uppsala University, Sweden. Her areas of expertise are nutrition, breastfeeding, international health, gender, program planning, results-based monitoring, research, and advocacy. She has worked with several UN agencies, bilateral donor agencies, civil society organizations, trade unions, and academic institutions globally on a range of issues such as maternal and child health, nutrition, and reproductive health. She has also worked extensively, in Africa and Asia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, my name is Amal Omar Salim, and I work as the Executive Director for WABA, the World Alliance for Breastfeeding Action. This year's theme for World Breastfeeding Week is Support Breastfeeding for a Healthier Planet. Next slide. Some of you may know that WABA was actually born on the 14th of February 1991, which is Valentine's Day. So it's all about the love and breastfeeding. One of the things about breastfeeding is that it is an expression of love. We are a global network of individuals and organizations, and we're all dedicated to the protection, promotion, and support of breastfeeding worldwide. WABA is the coordinator of the Global World Breastfeeding Week campaign, and the aim of this campaign is to inform, to anchor, to engage, and galvanize various actions on breastfeeding and related to the theme. Every year we have a theme, and since 2016 we have aligned the World Breastfeeding Week campaign with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And this is the biggest global development agenda, and it basically covers everything. And so World Breastfeeding Week is now known as the World Breastfeeding Week SDGs campaign. Next slide. So a little bit about the World Breastfeeding Week SDGs campaign. When the SDGs came into being in 2016, we clustered them into 4 thematic areas which relate to each other and to breastfeeding. And the idea is that we will be celebrating these 4 thematic areas in cycles until 2029, which will be the countdown year before the end of the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2030, it will be taking stock of progress and looking towards the future. So in each of the years, 2016 through 2017, 18, and 19, we have focused on various aspects related to the Sustainable Development Goals. Many of you will remember that the theme of 2017 was emphasizing the importance of working together, sustaining breastfeeding together. And I think this resonates also with the National Breastfeeding Month theme of United Voices. And the aim is then to make sure that we collaborate and to achieve more impact in whatever we are setting out to do. World Breastfeeding Week 2020 focuses on the links between breastfeeding and planetary health. Next slide, thank you. So we are all interconnected, people and the planet. We are interconnected for sure, and we know that we must find sustainable solutions that benefit both people and the planet we live on. We can all do something to reduce our carbon and eco footprints, and starting with how we feed our babies. And so that is really the entry point between this year's theme and breastfeeding. We do know also that breastfeeding is one of the best investments in saving lives and improving the health and socioeconomic development of the babies, mothers, individuals, and nations, and that we have to protect and promote and support breastfeeding as important strategies, and that we need to collaborate within the breastfeeding movement, but also beyond it. Next slide, please. So the objectives of World Breastfeeding Week 2020 are to inform people about the links between breastfeeding and the environment and climate change, and to anchor it as a climate smart decision, to engage with individuals and also organizations to get greater impact, to move the needle, and to galvanize the actions at all levels that are needed to improve the health of the planet and its people through breastfeeding. Next slide. We do face a number of challenges today, and here are some of them. Of course, we have huge issues when it comes to climate change and also environmental degradation. And these are some of the most urgent challenges facing our world today. And when we look at food systems, the food we produce and consume, and the patterns, that consumption patterns, these all contribute significantly to climate change and the degradation of the environment. Next slide. So we need planetary health. We need to ensure that we have sustainable action, and that we know then, for example, also that we have made quite a few advances in global health over the last few decades, but we have a number of emerging challenges and natural disasters, infectious disease outbreaks such as this current COVID-19 pandemic. And then we also have at the background a huge lack in terms of adequate health systems and access to health systems and care. And when we look at food systems and relation to breastfeeding, food production contributes to about 30% of the global soil acidification and over mineralization of water bodies. So we do know that what we eat, what we produce, and what we eat makes a difference. Next slide. So infant feeding method matters, and matters also for the health of the people. We know that if we could increase breastfeeding rates, we could prevent a huge number of child and maternal deaths every year, and that it also has huge benefits in terms of the economy as well. At the same time, we have very slow progress on breastfeeding. Although many start off breastfeeding, only about 40%, and this is global figures, are actually exclusively breastfed until 6 months and continue up to 2 years, which is what the international recommendations say. And this is underpinned by a lack of support, not only in the health system, but also at the workplaces and in the communities themselves. Next slide. So when we look at the ecological footprint of breastfeeding, some people say, oh, there is no ecological footprint, but of course there is the food that the mother needs to, the extra food that she needs to consume, and that also has an eco footprint. But direct breastfeeding and hand expression of breast milk are very efficient in terms of reducing waste and saving energy and other resources, compared to, for example, breast milk substitutes such as formula, infant formula. And this is due to the fact that infant formula, for example, requires dairy farming, and dairy farming releases a lot of methane and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And along the chain of manufacturing, packaging, distribution, and preparation, all those processes require energy and also water, and they impact on the environment and on the climate. Next slide. So what are we going to do about it? We have to find sustainable solutions, and we have to urgently do this. And this we can start doing by having the conversations like the one that we're having here. And we have to call for more robust research, and we have to engage all relevant sectors to take action. Next slide. So using the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework for planetary health, one of the important things at this higher level is that we need to align the policies that we have on breastfeeding and infant feeding with the development agenda and also the environment and climate initiatives. We need to ensure that we have a public health perspective on breastfeeding and strengthen breastfeeding counseling in the general population and also in those during emergencies. We have to advocate for those policies to reduce carbon emissions. We have to make sure that breastfeeding is protected through the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes and the World Health Assembly resolutions. And these need to be implemented in legislation and also monitored. And we need to make sure that there is paid family leave and workplace support based on the minimum standards. Next slide. So societal support, we need to invest in breastfeeding policies and also interventions and make sure that all families receive the support that they need. And communities need to also be informed of the impact of formula feeding on the environment. We need to use various communication techniques and influencers. We need to get a debate, a public debate, and sensitize journalists and the media to talk about these links and what they imply. And we need to allocate more resources for research and looking at and collecting data and disaggregated data also to see where the need is the greatest. Next slide. So one of the things that's really important as has come out in the research is that breastfeeding counseling is very effective in increasing breastfeeding rates. And so we need to advocate here that all families have access to skilled breastfeeding counseling. And we can make sure that we have the baby-friendly hospital initiatives implemented also in all facilities where babies are born. And also allocating those resources for community groups so that they can also provide the basic counseling and other forms of support which is close to the breastfeeding families. Next slide. We also know that the support needs to be from across the 1,000 days, which is from pregnancy till the child's second birthday. So this means that we have to have ongoing antenatal and postnatal breastfeeding support to not only initiate but also sustain optimal breastfeeding. We need to create a warm chain of support by making sure that all the actors are clear about their roles and know of each other and link to each other. We need to engage the broader family, fathers, partners, and get the family support in a tangible way where it's about sharing domestic responsibilities and also care. We need to encourage the parents to share their experiences and to normalize breastfeeding in that way. And we need to develop the virtual and online activities, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic, to engage different target audiences in World Breastfeeding Week 2020. Next slide. So to be able to provide this support, we need to also invest in training and capacity building for not only health professionals, but also community peer counselors, for example. And once they have been trained, they need to be placed and accessible to the families. And there we also have a number of training tools and programs, both online and offline, face-to-face, and practical skills. And these need to be promoted. And starting with the very young, from schools, engaging children, students and youth through the social media, to build that to sow the seed that will bear fruit later. Next slide. So at the same time as we are looking at the mainstream, we need to definitely focus on leaving no one behind. And the world we live in today is very inequitable. So here we need to look at those vulnerable populations, the ones where breastfeeding rates are the lowest. We need to focus on understanding that what is needed and being prepared, because very often those vulnerable groups are also those that are most vulnerable in terms of the impact of disasters, natural or man-made disasters. And making sure that the support for the families is targeted not only to the breastfeeding parent, but also the community and other family members. Finding and reviving the age-old skills like hand expression, relactation, wet nursing where appropriate, and those things that reinforce breastfeeding as the norm. And making sure that donor human milk is available for those babies who are preterm or otherwise cannot get access directly to their own mother's milk. Next slide. So finally, we need to find the sustainable solution for the planet and its people. And this we can do by creating a warm chain of support, which in turn will create an enabling environment and that will empower all to to be able to breastfeed optimally. And this will be a win-win then situation for humanity and the planet. So if you're thinking of celebrating World Breastfeeding Week 2020, which we welcome very much, these are 5 ways and there are many more. But sharing on our social media platforms, we will be developing social media kits and messages together with our partners. You can share your breastfeeding experiences and your needs for support during this pandemic that's ongoing and beyond. Your thoughts about the relationship between breastfeeding and the environment and climate change. You can pledge on our website your events and activities and also report them to showcase your organization. Tune in to the podcasts and the Ask Me Anything panels, which we will have during the first week of August and also later in October. And follow us on the social media, and also look at our dedicated World Breastfeeding Week website for more activity ideas and updates. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amal. And I think Camille's going to pop the link to the World Breastfeeding Week website in our chat so folks can check it out. Thank you for not only that focus on breastfeeding and planetary health, but also the reminder that World Breastfeeding Week was founded with love. I didn't know that before. That was so neat to hear. Moving forward in August, we will next hear from Jaysha Lyons Echohawk, the founder of Native Breastfeeding Week, and I'll just read a brief bio about her and then turn it right over to Jaysha. She is a lifelong justice seeker, community builder, and a part-time marathoner. She is a proud tribal citizen of the Seminole Nation, as well as a member of the Pawnee, Iowa, Omaha, and Creek Nations. Jaysha has organized in rural Oklahoma on such issues as access to healthcare and violence against women, breast and chest feeding advocacy, birth justice, food sovereignty, gun violence prevention, criminal justice reform, equity in leadership, and as a former political candidate. She's also a graduate of Northern Oklahoma College and Oklahoma State University, and has also been trained as a birth doula. She is currently a student midwife and an inaugural Indian Collective Changemaker Fellow. She maintains an active lifestyle with her husband Bunky and their 4 children. Take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, United States Breastfeeding Committee, for inviting me to speak on behalf of Native Breastfeeding Week. Thank you to all of you who have been doing this work for quite some time and lifting up this much needed, much necessary work. It's an honor to be presenting among you. Noa Akitaru Tatasati Tatachik Stariku. Hello everyone, my name is Jaysha Lyons Echohawk, and I just introduced myself in Pawnee with my Pawnee name, Ti Tatachik Stariku, which means she who thinks with her heart before she speaks. That is a continual, I guess, not just my name, but just a life lesson that I have to live up to, which is basically getting your brain, your mind, and your heart in sync before you move forward in the world. So I'm going to share my screen here. Can everybody see the Native Breastfeeding Week page? I hope. So Native Breastfeeding Week basically originated with
Oh, Jaysha, sorry, we're not seeing your screen. If you go up to the top of your GoToWebinar panel to the sharing submenu, I think if you click play, it should show.
Share. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Let's see. Present content. Is it audience view?
Sharing, I think.
Okay, let me see. Nope, that is sending you something. No,
Teacher, you might see like a big, what looks like a big play button to start showing your screen.
I'm sorry. No, it's and this might be because I'm on an iPad.
Oh, Do you want me to just share the Facebook page and I can scroll?
Yeah, that would be fine. Usually I can do this like in Zoom. I'm not familiar with this particular conference software.
No
So
worries.
thank you so much.
GoToWebinar has its own feelings.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. So Native Breastfeeding Week originated with, in large part, my advocacy. I consider myself a lactivist. And as was mentioned in my bio, Justice Seeker is like my forever quest for access and opportunity for everyone. My heart is, my immediate tribal community or my immediate community here, but often that has ripple effects to everyone worldwide. So when I was wondering about native breastfeeding, native breast or chest feeding in Oklahoma several years ago, I got involved with the state breastfeeding coalition here, and was kind of a distant participant, in large part because of my lack of access to being able to get to all the meetings, which were always hosted around the state, mostly hosted in a central location. And so as I progressed with my second child in breastfeeding efforts and advocacy. I gained attention, friendship, relationships with other breast and chest feeding relatives or those lactation providers and supporters, not just in my immediate circle within the state, but outward and across waters, if you will. So in thinking about why doesn't Oklahoma have a particular week, or how could we uplift visibility of our fellow native breast and chest feeders, there really wasn't a big push, maybe just like a lack of connection to other native people like myself. So I reached out. I didn't exactly hear back, and I decided to see maybe we could lift this up nationally. I reached out to a native-based organization, and we initially started working and partnering on a specific week. We looked at, I have always looked at World Breastfeeding Week as a source of information, and I've always looked at Black Breastfeeding Week as a source of information, and also just trying to find research on rates for, information for natives in particular to the United States. And there is very little research. It's scant research. So I myself am not a researcher, but I definitely advocate for equity and policy, equity in healthcare, and just wondered what could we do? What could be done? Being the organizer, being the advocate that I am, asking questions and visiting with other people that I think might have answers or might be able to build the power that we needed. So in this organization that I reached out to, we initially thought about doing a native breastfeeding toolkit. I know other tribal breastfeeding coalitions have done something really similar, and we certainly did not want to duplicate. We wanted to be just like in line and in support with other organizations, because in addition to this, I tried to see if there was like a map for all the tribal coalitions. Like, is there a database that tracks these tribal breastfeeding and chest feeding coalitions or these lactation supporters? And I didn't exactly find a central location. So the organization ended up falling off, and I already had pushed forward on this effort. So I just reached out across Turtle Island, as we call it, the West Coast, the Southeast, the East Coast, here in Oklahoma, Southwest, up by the Great Lakes, of all the people that I knew who had either a supporter, a lactation consultant, a birth worker, community health nurses, Indigenous breastfeeding counselors. They themselves provided milk to their babies, or they, instead of using formula, were able to supply their adopted babies with human milk. And they're all Native or Indigenous community organizers like myself, community advocates. And I just collected a bunch of these people to contribute to stories. If you could scroll down, Sarah, to the pinned post right here. If you can click see more. So we're just highlighting the diversity in the experiences of native breast and chest feeders, lactation providers, lactation supporters. And that wasn't just limited to, as we have known breastfeeding to be between moms or women, femmes, and their babies, but anybody who participates in supporting, in contributing, and whatever that looks. We are thinking from a decolonized sense, these people that I have worked with, that I've collaborated with, and we are putting a face to the data, to even the scant data that's out there, sharing the contributions, the importance, the adversity and celebration of native breast and chest feeding families. In some ways, native breastfeeding and chest feeding is an act of defiance to the colonial systems and their imposed norms, as well as the resilience of culture and body sovereignty. So no matter the length of your experience. So again, talking to not just like what is lactation, what is breastfeeding, what is chest feeding, it's also how it has been in our communities, how it's been treated, because some of us have lost those stories, those ways, due in part to colonization. So it's not as though we can just promote, these really beautiful images and pictures of people feeding their babies or supporting the feeding of their babies from breast or chest, but we also have to acknowledge what happened. Why is it that we have the second to lowest breastfeeding and chest feeding initiation rates, duration rates, exclusivity rates? There was some data that I pulled up from, I believe it was the NIH. I can't remember what that stands for, but it's a national health organization based in the States that says if Native women do not supply their babies with their own milk, or excuse me, according to this research, it was Native mothers, that's how it was described, do not supply their own babies with their breast milk, then formula supplementation is at a 97% rate. So it's not just that if they don't breastfeed, they are getting formula. So then I wondered, well, why isn't human milk an option? But then there's a lack of access to human milk as well, just across any community, whether you're Native, another POC, or even a non-POC. I found in my research that it's not covered either by private or public insurance, and sometimes buying donor milk without insurance can easily cost thousands of dollars a month. So we've had people that as far as collaborators that can support or provide some kind of visual or detail or experience shared through this Facebook page, as we are just right now. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind going to the photos, and I believe it's just not the timeline photo album, but just posting. Yes, this one, the racist of like that mobile uploads. If you could just scroll down. I mean, there's posts that concern just everybody within the diaspora or the spectrum of indigeneity. We're not people that just look like me. As you see, I think what people perceive as a Native person. We are also Black, or we are also lighter skinned, where we don't look as brown. And so if you go down, you'll see images of some of the stories that we've shared from people who have openly shared with us. We have a mother, and this actually, I did not foresee that it would transcend the so-called colonial borders of the United States, but we have people all over the world who have sent us photos or sent us stories, sent some kind of support. You can continue to scroll down. That's Kiya Jane right there. She's the artist behind the artwork that is posted on Facebook. And we will have another specific art piece for Native Breastfeeding Week in the second year. That's just an image we pulled from some organizations and some profiles that are doing work. That child right there is somebody who was supported with donor milk, Penobscot child right there. you continue going down, you'll see this Canadian mother, Oji Cree. I can't remember all her tribes, but she has triplets that these triplets right here, they have been breastfed for several months. I believe she exceeded a year. She was really excited to share and said that she did look to our page as a form of support in her journey. Now, it's, it can be very romanticized where it looks so easy to breast or chest feed. So that's where we also acknowledge that that's not always the case. And when we can, we provide resources. I'm constantly looking up content for articles regarding inclusive lactation support for our people that breast or chest feed. But again, like for me, lactation I felt was my superpower, but it seemed like it's also treated like a privilege and not a sovereign right, regardless of whether you're Indigenous or not. That means, we have policies in the United States that aren't there to support in the political, in the legal, in the financial, in the social way. And I often go to organizations like World Breastfeeding Week or even the World Health Organization Week to look up, ways and information to get this information across in our page, so people aren't just here for the nice, beautiful images, but they're also learning and engaging and decolonizing their minds and their thoughts. Additionally, understanding, that rates aren't low because we just don't do it, that there's been historical implications to that, and what acts of breast or chest feeding do. And it has been, proven in the research that you can help reshape the epigenetics of your descendants in this act of feeding milk to your babies. I'll just mention, that colonization and patriarchy have starved most of Native people of my ancestors, physically, spiritually, and culturally, and even today. And it was, has places in starving off my ancestors from like physically, like food access, so they couldn't support their first food, their milk, to their babies, and they were reduced to cancer-causing rations, which didn't supply their bodies with the adequate nutrients needed for lactation. So there is systematic issues that we're dealing with when it comes to acknowledging, breast and chest feeding rights, and so also looking for those answers to those challenges, and then making sure that there are supports, community supports, policy supports for these people. So I appreciate the time and space y'all have allowed today. That's my friend down in Mexico. Unfortunately, I cannot remember her tribe, but first-time mom, and was sharing her story with us, and shared it in Spanish. So we shared it in Spanish and English for our Spanish-speaking Indigenous relatives, or just anybody really. But yeah, I'll continue to fight for access so that all the parents who can and want to breastfeed and chest feed will have that right, anytime, anywhere, on demand. And extended breastfeeding is not a taboo, but culturally relevant and respected. For those of you out there who aren't sure what that means, that's providing milk to your child beyond the age of 1. In Indigenous communities, a lot of times we would just feed our babies until they were done, till they wanted to wean. The triplets again. I fed my son, who is 5 now, like right up until 6 months ago. And our 2-year-old, she still comes to me. She's almost 3 actually, but yeah, that image right there, anytime, anywhere, on demand until we're done. Really powerful image of this Alaskan Native person feeding, what looks like a baby and what also looks like a child, older than an infant. That's not a taboo image. That's an image that we have to reclaim, especially when we think about the implications of health and wellness cultural relevance. So yeah, again, just thank you for the time. You can continue to follow our work at Native Breastfeeding Week on Facebook. I understand that is gendered language, and so we are looking at ways to continue moving and evolving as we need to when it comes to being inclusive with this this act of lactation and lactation providers and lactation supporters. And so thank you. Mado.
Thank you so much, Jaysha. Thank you for walking us through not just the process and the reasons to celebrate Native Breastfeeding Week, but also like the deep and critical reasons that you founded it and that you're carrying it forward, not just this year, but every year, and not just that week, but every week. Thank you so much. And so our final presenter for today is Anaya Shangodele Ayoka, who will be speaking about Black Breastfeeding Week, as she is one of the co-founders. Anaya Shangodele Ayoka, CNM, MSN, and MS-Ed, is a nurse midwife and innovative culture worker leveraging digital media to impact health and parenting. Clinically, she cares for women across the lifespan in Washington, D.C. Anaya also writes, speaks, and consults with organizations on using social media to deepen community building and leverage social change. She is a co-founder of Black Breastfeeding Week, co-editor of Free to Breastfeed, Voices from Black Mothers, published by Preclaris Press, and a consultant with Moms Rising. Her work has been written about on Salon.com, HuffPost, Ms. Magazine, Matermea, My Brown Baby, and Think Progress. And I am so excited to turn it over to Naya to take us into the final week of August, Black Breastfeeding Week.
Hi, can you guys hear and see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. I'm Anaya Shangodele Ayoka, and I just wanted to be able to show my face and put a little bit of movement and activity into the call a little bit before we get into the slides. Thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank USBC for hosting this, of course, and giving us the time to talk about what's going to happen during August as we celebrate breastfeeding and chest feeding and lactation. I think at this point, especially after hearing what Jaysha just had to say, it's no longer just national for even those of us who started out with campaigns that people tend to think of as US focused. I have so much respect and admiration for what Amal and Jaysha have done. And I'm so grateful to follow after them as they've described the scope of their work. And of course, really the thing that I think moves a lot of us is the underpinnings to really understand the theories of change and what's behind it. Especially hearing from Jaysha really moved me because, you know, especially in the US, we are so used to the erasure of Indigenous people. And so I'm so proud of that work that y'all are doing. And I just want to thank you for your bravery and persistence. So I'm going to start to share my screen now. And if someone who is behind the scenes can let me know if it's showing or not, that would be awesome. Not showing anything, okay.
Not yet.
Oh no, it's telling me I'll have to restart. Okay, I'm sorry, that's not gonna work. We can leave up the main slide and I can talk through them. You can put up the placeholder and I'm fine to just talk through it. The origin of Black Breastfeeding Week is that there are three of us who co-founded Black Breastfeeding Week. It's Kidada Green of Black Mothers Breastfeeding Association and Kimberly Seals Allers of Kimberly Seals Allers, she just does everything, but also of the Mocha Manual series, Black Breastfeeding 360. And we, to give the sort of like casual version, we were sitting at a conference and Kimberly had recently written an op-ed that appeared, I want to say on HuffPost, where she was expressing her frustration with how there was a lack of, or a fear, I should say, probably a fear of having targeted ethnic or cultural or racial breastfeeding awareness moments, and her frustration with that, and saying, you know what, now we're just going to have to take things in our own hands, and we're going to have a Black Breastfeeding Week, because it's very important for us to be able to call out the racial disparities, of course, but it doesn't help us to also wait for a trickle-down approach to addressing particular communities that we know have unique needs. So we were sitting at this conference, and we'd all read Kimberly's piece and said, you know what, we should do the Black Breastfeeding Week, and let's start this year. That was in 2013, and it was partway a little bit of hubris and just excitement that made us say, you know what, I think we can pull this off in 3 weeks. And we did. So in 2013, we held the first Black Breastfeeding Week. Our theme of that year was Black Lives Matter. And we'd actually reached out to the Black Lives Matter people to see if that was okay. And at that point, they didn't have such a strong focus yet on police brutality. It was still very burgeoning. And they were like, absolutely, you know, everything's a part of it. Black Lives Matter means so many things. I want to say overall, what undergirds our work is a few things. We know that breastfeeding is, of course, as Jaysha said, it's a sovereign right. It's a human right that becomes a privilege. It becomes made a privilege by systems of exclusion and oppression. So it's something we should all have access to, and that access itself, the knowledge of, the support for, et cetera, gets put into a system of privilege by our systems of exclusion and oppression. And so in order to address that, we really do feel like we have to pay attention to all aspects of that. That means that we have to sort of have a reckoning. That means not just noticing that breastfeeding rates have differences among racial and economic lines. It means actually understanding what that means. And so if we're going to have a culturally reflective and responsive approach, we have to understand the history and the legacies of that history and how they inform our daily lives today. So part of that reckoning and what that looks like during Black Breastfeeding Week, it means that we pay attention to and showcase some of the research that talks about the histories of wet nursing, histories of enslavement themselves. Because even if we don't get to the history of wet nursing, one has to recognize the centuries of dehumanization, of deculturalization that was taking place during periods of enslavement for African people in this country. And so we have to pay attention to that because it affects every aspect of our lives today. It has affected the way all of our institutions have emerged and have been created in the US. So we pay attention to the research that talks about that, and we try to uplift that research. So just as much as we do interviews to talk about the celebrations of Black Breastfeeding Week, we try to point to our researchers, and not Black Breastfeeding Week proper researchers, but people who are focusing on this work and making it their life's work to use their skills of analysis and data collection to dig into that history, and also to study what that looks like today. It also means truth telling, and so not all of that reckoning is about the ivory tower or academia and what it says about the history. It's also about people sharing their lived experiences. I personally come to this work from having been an aspiring midwife and a breastfeeding mother who in the early 2000s did not see Black women breastfeeding. You know, if you Google breastfeeding or even Black breastfeeding, you would get pictures of white women breastfeeding only. You might get some porn images, but the idea of even seeing people of color, people of various skin shades showing this very natural human act was like impossible. You really had to go out of your way. And so I had a friend that I worked with at that time, Janine Bowery, who's also a midwife now, who we did something called the Brown Mamas Breastfeed Project, where we just got images from women and we sort of tried to flood the internet with them, with Black moms, showing themselves breastfeeding and also including like a little statement. Well, that project sort of, it grew, all those people wanted it to turn into a book. We tried to expand our language a little bit around gender and gendering the act of lactating and providing mother's milk or human milk to babies. And that grew into me organizing with Moms Rising and working on their maternal justice work, and brought me into the company of Kiya Jane and Kimberly Seals Allers. So we do reckoning. we also do a ton of reclaiming. And so what that means is paying attention to not only the fact that providing human milk to babies is something that we can do, but it's something that we have done. This is not us doing something new or adopting a new health practice. This is the legacy of all human groups, of all human people. And so we also try to reclaim that, which also means paying attention to the fact that our history is not only the histories of oppression, it has been the ways that our families have tried to preserve our humanity and our familial and cultural practices, even through enslavement and oppression and what we had prior to. It also involves a great deal of healing and celebrating. So we take great effort to not center Black Breastfeeding Week in a conversation about disparities, in a conversation about lack. We have what we would call an asset-based framework, where we very much believe that the solutions and innovations for continuing to better our communities lie right within those communities. And so we try to always uplift that work. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how that happens. We start by giving the language for our own narrative. So that is how we sort of try to reframe the discussion away from Black people breastfeed this much and white people breastfeed this much. Because if you really think about what that language is rooted in, it's either rooted in some spectrum of inferiority because we are privileging or we are making a certain behavior saying that it is the ideal. And saying these people don't do it, and it's either going to be because they can't, or they won't, or they don't know how. But this is human behavior. This is not something that grew out of U.S. society. So we really have to dig into that a little bit more and make sure that our language reflects the actual thing that's happening. And that again goes back to discussing how privilege is created by these systems of exclusion and oppression, and it is not simply a lack of a desire. We try to center families. And so a part of that is that in our promotion and in our events, we try to include what people would tend to call extended family, like grandparents. We include partners, whether they are fathers or same-sex partners or what have you. We try to always make sure that their experiences and perspectives are included. And a part of that just comes from research showing that, there have been so many interventions that showed if you had a grandmother involved, that could change the trajectory of a lactating person's breastfeeding experience. And a part of that is because of the intergenerational trauma that has kept folks from breastfeeding. So if we know breastfeeding had been sort of erased or suppressed for generations, then we're going to have generations who don't know how to support that even in their own families. So we always try to make sure that even as we are uplifting the current generation of breastfeeders, we are still sort of enveloping generations of family at the same time, so they understand what this movement is about and they feel included and not excluded by a kind of narrative that can say, well, I'm doing this thing that's better than what you did because I know better than you. No, this is our history, it's our legacy, we're reclaiming, and the grandparents still get to be a part of that. So every year we tend to have a theme for Black Breastfeeding Week, which we come up with by spending time in conversation, talking to lots of people from communities, being a part of listening groups and paying attention to what's happening in social media, but also paying attention to what's happening in the world at the moment, and particularly how that affects our communities. So again, I'll say that, we believe that having a culturally reflective and culturally responsive programming means having an understanding of history and how the history is affecting our lived experiences. And as everybody can see what's happening right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, that reckoning always has to take place. And we always try to make sure that we are helping people to understand the way that comes to play in lactating and reproduction. Our events, we focus on having them be in and of the community, and this year is probably going to look a little bit different as we try to encourage people to focus mostly on virtual events. We tend to do some sort of toolkit, giving ideas for local community organizers for events that they can do that relate to the theme for the year. We have some signature moments like a lift that we do, like this lift up, baby lift up, and it's typically on a Saturday where people take photos of themselves lifting their babies up, which is a reference to the movie Roots, and the idea of holding the baby up, and that moment in the film where they talk to the baby and say, remember, there's nothing, I can't remember the exact language, but there's nothing beneath you that is greater than you, kind of thing. As well as from the Black National Anthem, that is about like lifting every voice. We talk about lifting every baby. So again, like having that be a culturally reflective thing. We also are heavy on collaboration. I know we're running short on time, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about some highlights from our events. We focus on collaborative voices, collaborating across the country. So for Black Breastfeeding Week, we'll tend to host a few signature events, mainly on social media. And that first year in 2013, I believe we had 4 events. And then one of them was Black Mothers Breastfeeding Association's Summit in Detroit that they tend to hold every year. And then a couple of online events. Since then, we've grown to over 200 events across the country, and there have been events, I want to say, in South Africa and England as well. And a ton of virtual things, a lot on Instagram, a lot on Facebook, from webinars to webinars about lactation careers, webinars about understanding the research, to discussions where we tend to have a discussion where partners, same-sex partners or fathers, we've done both, talk about their experience supporting lactation and supporting that journey. And this year, we're going to sort of continue that too and try to see how we can support all of the local organizers around the country in still keeping the energy of Black breastfeeding strong while encouraging people to stay safe in the context of coronavirus. I think I'm going to end there. So we have time left over for questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, USBC.
Thank you so much, Naya. And yeah, we will zip through like these mini USBC updates so we can get to questions. And thank you to everyone for hanging out with us. And thank you, Naya, for sharing that amazing work of you, Kadada, and Kimberly. I will just say I am so grateful that you all took that leap and organized the first Black Breastfeeding Week in just a few weeks. I think we've all been there and thought, do we have the time? And I'm really, for one, I'm very happy that you all made the time. So I will shift over. I think we have Camille Abbey is going to speak a little bit about the middle week. So not World Breastfeeding Week, not Native Breastfeeding Week, and not Black Breastfeeding Week in the middle of August.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you so much, everyone. I think everyone here listening and within sound of the presentation today feels that we could easily be learning from each other for well more than an hour each. I'm just really, really grateful to each of you for presenting with us today. That speaks to really the heart of what we are doing and trying to do collaboratively together, especially during National Breastfeeding Month, and always, because that's what the USPC is about. And I want to just lift up this third week. This third week is going to be called this year Spotlight on Infant and Young Child Feeding in Emergencies. Relevant to now and always. We have a curated list of resources on the webpage, and we're always seeking more. So there's a lot. I think we can always find more or better. Please let us know if you have any suggestions for that page. Want to also lift that we are launching an action tool very soon to encourage legislators to take 3 actions to integrate infant and young child feeding into future emergency preparedness and response efforts. I'm not going to talk about the details of that. You'll be getting notification when we launch that tool. It will be very, very soon. And one more important August event needs mentioning, and that is what we are calling MVCC Reimagined. That is the National Breastfeeding Conference and Convening, which would have been this month, June 12th through 13th, and we canceled that back in March due to the pandemic, as you most of you know. But as you can imagine, a lot of work had already gone into the planning of the event. And so in August, the USBC will be rolling out some of that content, quite a lot of that content actually, as MVCC Reimagined. Miriam Rodriguez, Coalition Relations Coordinator at the USBC, is going to tell us a little bit more. Miriam?
Thank you so much, Camille. Hi, everyone. This is Miriam. As Camille mentioned, the MVCC Reimagined will be launching in August. Although we are a bit sad to not, be in person with all of you, we are very excited to offer this to the field free of charge. We will be launching 6 pre-recorded sessions total. They will be on a wide variety of topics with 15 different presentations and over 30 presenters. So they will be starting the first Monday of August, and each one will be made available each week, the first Monday of each week, with the last one being available for October Safe Sleep Awareness Month. So we are, as I mentioned, might have mentioned, this will be free of charge, and we are applying for continuing education. So more information on that will be coming soon. And I can go ahead and share the website link on the chat for you all to stay tuned. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miriam. This is Camille again. Before we go, we would be remiss if we didn't mention that the USBC has new items in the print-on-demand store featuring our Support Families, Babies, Breastfeeding design. You guys probably know we make a couple of bucks, literally it's like 3 on every purchase. So you're also showing support for our otherwise unfunded advocacy activities with every purchase. So really important. I'm speaking quickly. We'll put the link in the chat for the store as well. We have the link in for MVCC Reimagined, and I want to move to questions, reflections. We have some great questions, and Cheryl Lebetovich is joining us from her vacation to moderate our questions. Cheryl?
Thanks so much, Camille. Thank you, Anaya, Jaysha, Amal. That was an awesome presentation. I'm so looking forward to our August events. We do have a few questions here, lots of shout outs, lots of connections will help facilitate, particularly to you, Jaysha, if that's all right. We have the first question here is for you, Jaysha, asking whether there is a way to submit photos for the Native Breastfeeding Week page. Is there maybe an email that folks could reach out to?
So we don't have a standard email for the page specifically. You could share my email in the chat, which is j.lyonsechohawk, one word, @gmail.com. A lot of times people have just inboxed us, which is totally fine as well. We pull from everything you share, and we ask to, because initially especially with the person who was able to breastfeed their triplets, she just shared in the message, and we read her story and then went back to her and asked her, would it be okay if we actually posted your pictures in your story? And she was okay with that. So, I mean, even if you post, send us the message for the photos and your story, we don't right away just take it and post it. We'll make sure that you have, what do they say, editorial discretion and what we share out, what we post, because we do want to be mindful of, that there's a larger audience that's viewing this. So yeah, thank you for the question.
Wonderful. And yeah, we put your email into the chat box. So please, we always hope that these presentations are at the start of a conversation, not the end of one. I also forgot to flag at the beginning of this. I know, Anaya, you weren't able to share your slides, but we'll make sure to get those, and we can post them on the Collective Impact webinar webpage on the USBC website so that folks can have access to them, and that the time you put into that was not for naught. With that, we have just a couple more questions. The first is asking for Native Breastfeeding Week and Black Breastfeeding Week, whether the vision was for those to remain US focused, or if you're interested in exploring a more of an international focus. So Anaya or Jaysha, do you have any thoughts?
And I can go first.
This is Anaya. I couldn't hear what you said, Jaysha. So no, our focus was never, our desire was never to have it be national. So we've never called it National Black Breastfeeding Week. I think that some people, when they hear Black, they think we mean Black American. but we are, so like I said, we have had celebrations happen in, I want to say, London for 2 years in a row, and then in South Africa. But I think, you know, as people who identify as Black, or because that can be a particular designation that some people don't identify with, but people who identify with that or see how that is relevant in other parts of the world, we are happy to continue to support that, because we do see ourselves as not our identities not being limited to our history of having been enslaved in this country. So we see our experiences being connected prior to, and then the history of colonialism that has meant that we are a diasporic people across the world. So we absolutely feel connected and are happy to have Black Breastfeeding Week be an international experience.
Thank you,
This is,
Anaya.
oh, sorry, this is Jaysha. Yeah, real quick, I kind of second Anaya. The colonial borders are just that, they're colonial borders. Our territories, our jurisdiction have always been all across, although the language that we tend to use is usually like state specific. So like Native Breastfeeding Week, for example, I don't know that Canadians or I think it's First Nations, the tribes up there go by First Nations like more broadly. But yeah, I think just the similar colonial or the similar experiences in dealing with colonization in the US, in Canada, in what is known as Mexico is all related, and even just beyond worldwide. So I would welcome that. I would have to bring that to my committee though, as to how we would scale it up. But just in terms of data, of keeping track and all that, I think that would definitely lend itself, and if we had more cross collaboration, it would be ideal to see, a fuller picture. So thank you for the question.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We have so many shout outs to all of our speakers today. Huge thank you, Jaysha, Anaya, Amal. We are so excited to be able to bring all your brilliance together for today's presentation. Just another reminder, we will be sharing the recording from today's call, including the slides. You're going to find them on the USBC website. And we will continue to update the National Breastfeeding Month webpage with links to the social media toolkits and all these other wonderful resources that our panelists have shared with us today. Please stay tuned. Also through the Weekly Wire, you can sign up at usbreastfeeding.org/signup. We are looking forward to connecting with you all virtually and in communities this August, and look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.